At the end of World War II in 1945, Korea was freed from Japanese control. Korea was then divided by two different parties of the 38th parallel. North of the 38th parallel was controlled by the Soviet Union, which demonstrated communism, while south of the 38th parallel was controlled by the US, which demonstrated democracy. By 1948, the country was divided in half at the 38th parallel. South Korea was capitalist and was ran by Syngman Rhee, while North Korea was communist and ruled by Kim Il-sung. The Soviet Union soon withdrew from North Korea in 1948, and then the U.S. troops followed by withdrawing from South Korea a year later in 1949. As tension escalated between the North and South, North Korea made the first step into what is known as the Korean War by attacking the South on June 25, 1950. North Korea was successful and pushed past the 38th parallel by killing 75,000 South Korean troops. North Korea then captured South Korea's capital of Seoul and occupied the remainder of South Korea except one part known as Pusan. As war continued in Korea, the U.S. President Harry S. Truman soon became involved in Korea because of the Truman Doctrine and his policy of containment. The Truman Doctrine was a way Truman attempted to combat the spread of communism by giving weapons and supplies to any forces against the communist takeover in their country. Truman's policy of containment was a way to stop the spread of communism around the globe at any means necessary. Since Truman follows these two policies, he was determined to halt communism spread in Asia and to make containment work. As Kim Il-sung's North Korean army, armed with Soviet tanks, quickly overran South Korea, the United States came to South Korea's aid. General Douglas MacArthur, who had been overseeing the post-World War II occupation of Japan, now commanded the primarily U.S. forces, which also composed with 16 other nations, including South Korea. The forces landed in South Korea in early July of 1950. The North Korean forces attacked quickly upon the arrival of the opposing forces by pushing them in the southernmost tip of South Korea, known as Pusan. MacArthur ordered his troops to defend Pusan until reinforcements arrived in August. Upon the arrival of reinforcements, MacArthur orchestrated an ambitious attack to now be on the offensive. On September 15th, the U.S. Marines attacked the North Koreans at Incheon, a port of the western coast of Korea. MacArthur crushed the North Korean army and was able to recapture Seoul, the capital of South Korea. Instead of being satisfied with his rapid reconquest of South Korea, MacArthur crossed the 38th parallel. On October 12th, MacArthur had captured the North Korean capital of Pyongyang and then the Yalu River, which bordered communist China. Afraid that MacArthur and his troops had advanced so quickly into the northernmost provinces of North Korea, China retaliated by assisting the North Koreans in order to push U.S. forces back. The Chinese sent 250,000 troops. Overwhelmed and outnumbered, the North Korean and Chinese forces were able to push back U.S. forces entirely out of North Korea and once again was able to capture the South Korean capital of Seoul by January 1951. After a long-pursued game of capturing each other's capitals, MacArthur had soon run out of ideas and did not know how to defeat the North Koreans. However, he soon came up with an idea of using the atomic bomb against the North Koreans in an effort to quickly and surely defeat them. MacArthur was dismissed due to insubordination by President Truman. President Truman then announces this to the public in this speech.
To prevent a third world war. A number of events have made it evident that General MacArthur did not agree with that policy. I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur so that there would be no doubt or confusion as to the real purpose and aim of our policy. It was with the deepest personal regret that I found myself compelled to take this action. General MacArthur is one of our greatest military commanders, but the cause of world peace is much more important than any individual.
After General MacArthur was taken out of power, General Matthew Ridgway soon took MacArthur's place. In June 1951, more UN forces arrived and were again able to drive the North Koreans back to the 38th parallel. This resulted in a stalemate, a situation in which neither side can make progress. In July of 1951, peace talks began, but no compromises were made. General Dwight D. Eisenhower soon became president in early 1953 and was able to end the war. After 2 years of negotiation, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953.
My fellow citizens, tonight we greet with prayers of thanksgiving the official news that an armistice was signed almost an hour ago in Korea. It will quickly bring to an end the fighting between the United Nations forces and the communist armies. For this nation, the cost of repelling aggression has been high. In thousands of homes, it has been incalculable. It has been paid in terms of tragedy. With special feelings of sorrow and of solemn gratitude, we think of those who were called upon to lay down their lives in that far-off land to prove once again that only courage and sacrifice can keep freedom alive upon the earth.
This day became a sigh of relief for people with loved ones fighting in the war. One of those people was my Aunt Katie. My Aunt Katie's brother's name was Joseph Patrick O'Leary. Upon being drafted for the war at age 19, Joe went through a series of training at a base in Maryland for him to be a tank driver. Soon later, he was sent to Korea. However, because Joe was sent so late during the war, he never had the opportunity to go into the battlefield, but rather served as a military officer to make sure there was no more tension happening after the war ended. My Aunt Katie vividly remembers the day she found out the war was over, so that she knew her brother could come home again.
Our family was together for a party at my mother's friends, Rita Donahue's, in Willow Grove. It was a Sunday afternoon. We had the radio on, and they announced that the war had ended, and my brother was on the ship. Still going to Korea. He was on his ship, and they ended the war that Sunday afternoon. And everybody in the house was crying.
Although it ended the war and restored an uneasy peace to Korea, the armistice was a failure in many ways. After 3 years of fighting and 4 million dead and wounded, including over 50,000 American combat deaths, Korea remained divided into two armed camps just as before the war. Furthermore, the treaty and the war did almost nothing to bring the Cold War closer to an end. U.S.-USSR tensions were as high or higher after Korea as they had been before. North Korea fell into poverty and couldn't keep up with South Korea's economic pace. South Korea soon boosted as GDP quadrupled that of North Korea. North Korea did, however, remain fairly independent of USSR and PRC influence. The U.S. made many of the same mistakes in the Vietnam War, in which the U.S. yet again backed a corrupt southern regime against a communist nationalist northern regime that effectively fought a guerrilla war. In Vietnam, once again fighting a non-industrialized country, the U.S. nevertheless employed its strategic bombing to an even greater extent, not surprisingly with a little result. Had American military and political policymakers considered the lessons of Korea rather than the lessons of World War II and appeasement, they might have avoided the Vietnam War.